The courtroom sat in stillness, bathed in warm amber light that reflected off the polished wooden benches and carried the heavy air of judgment. At the center of it all sat Judge Marion, a woman whose calm voice could silence storms. She leaned slightly forward, her reading glasses sliding down her nose, as she looked at the man before her. David Miller, a father in his late 40s whose eyes held the weight of years of effort and disappointment. His voice trembled, not from fear, but from exhaustion, the kind that comes when life keeps testing the same wound over and over again. Beside him sat his teenage son, Tyler, now 19, hands clasped tightly together, eyes downcast as if afraid to meet anyone's gaze. Behind them sat Angela Reed, Tyler's mother and David's former partner, the woman he once thought he would grow old with, but now faced only through court dates and cold legal terms. Their lives had collided again, not because of love or chance, but because of a debt, a promise, and the kind of pride that breaks more families than poverty ever could. Judge Marion adjusted her glasses and spoke softly. "Mr. Miller, there are 2 parts to your claim today," she said. Her tone wasn't cruel, but it carried the weight of truth. The first, repayment for your son's restitution. The second, overpayment of child support. She paused, allowing the silence to settle, the kind of pause that forces every person in the room to face their own reflection. David swallowed hard and nodded. He wasn't there for revenge, he was there for fairness, something he had given up believing in long ago. The story began years earlier, when Tyler was only 14. Back then, he was bright, quick with a smile, but restless, like so many young boys on the edge of becoming men. He had fallen in with the wrong crowd, made a few terrible choices, and before long found himself standing in front of a juvenile judge. His crime was small, some stolen bikes, a few broken locks, but the sentence carried weight. The court ordered restitution to the victims, $1,590.40. It wasn't an unbearable amount, but for a divorced family living on separate budgets and separate wounds, it was enough to spark a quiet war. "We'll both take care of it," David had told Angela back then. "He's our son. We'll pay it together." But promises made in peace rarely survive the noise of life. Angela had nodded, but months passed and no payment came. She had her own struggles, bills, rent, fatigue, and perhaps in her mind it wasn't cruelty that stopped her from helping, just survival. But David remembered. He always remembered. Years later, Tyler had another chance, a rare one. A football coach from another state had seen him play, seen the spark of raw potential, and offered him a chance to train with their team. It could have been the beginning of something good. But before he could leave Illinois, the probation department demanded that all restitution be paid in full. Only then would Tyler be allowed to move out of state. David didn't hesitate. He worked extra hours, skipped meals, and finally paid every dollar himself. He believed his son deserved a clean start, even if it meant taking the burden alone. He didn't complain, not until now, because when he paid that final check, he also believed that Angela, the boy's mother, would keep her word and pay her half. But years passed and the money never came. Every time he asked, the same reply echoed back, "Not now, I can't afford it." Now, in front of Judge Marion, those old promises had turned into paperwork and exhaustion. The judge listened carefully, her pen moving slowly across the page. "So, you say you paid the full restitution of $1,590.40, she said, confirming each word like a note in a melody of truth. David nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." She turned her attention toward Angela. "And Ms. Reed, you never contributed." Angela's voice trembled but carried a hint of defiance. "I couldn't at the time. I was struggling financially." Judge Marion tilted her head, her gaze sharp but not cruel. "That may be true," she said, "but financial struggle doesn't erase responsibility. You both brought him into this world. When he was 14, he couldn't pay that debt himself. That means it was on you." Angela's shoulders slumped, and for a moment, her face softened. "I know," she whispered. "I owe half. I just couldn't do it back then." The judge nodded once. Acknowledging it is a start. But then came the second half of the case, the part that stung more than any financial loss. David had overpaid child support. After years of deductions and adjustments, a county audit revealed that he had sent $834.73 more than required. It wasn't a fortune, but for him it was symbolic. Proof that he had done his part and more. When the judge asked Angela about it, she didn't deny it. "I used it," she said quietly, "for his graduation fees." His cap, gown, ceremony, everything her tone carried both pride and guilt, like a mother who wanted to do right but had long stopped knowing how. "That's fine," Judge Marion said calmly, "if you had his permission." Angela hesitated, looking briefly at David. "He told me to use it." To help Tyler, David's brow furrowed. "I never said that," he replied firmly. "I didn't even know about the graduation until after it happened." "I wasn't invited." The words dropped into the room like a stone into still water. Angela's lips pressed together, and Tyler's eyes flickered with discomfort. Even the judge paused, her pen hovering in midair. "You weren't invited to your own son's graduation?" she asked softly. David shook his head. "No, Mum." And though the answer was simple, the silence that followed was heavy with years of quiet heartbreak. Judge Marion sighed, setting her pen down. "You've both hurt each other more than you've helped your son," she said finally. "But that ends today." She turned toward Tyler, who hadn't spoken since the hearing began. "Young man," she said, "you only get one mother and one father. And from where I'm standing, your father did more than just pay money. He tried. That's worth something." Tyler looked up, his eyes shimmering, and for the first time his voice broke through. "Yes, Mum," he said softly. "He's been there. I just didn't see it." Judge Marion gave a faint smile. "Then see it now. Make peace. It's easier than holding grudges that only hurt you later." Her gavel came down like thunder, echoing off the courtroom walls. "Judgment for the plaintiff," she declared. $1,629. The words carried finality, but they also carried release, like a knot slowly untangling after years of tension. Angela closed her eyes and nodded, whispering something that sounded almost like, "Thank you." David simply exhaled, a slow breath of relief, the kind that feels like the first one after years underwater. Outside the courtroom, the world looked different. The hallway was flooded with soft daylight filtering through tall windows. David stood alone for a while, the check in his hand trembling slightly. He didn't care about the money anymore. What mattered was being heard, being seen as more than a number on a child support form. Across the hall, Angela and Tyler stood talking quietly. Angela's tone was softer now, almost apologetic. "Go wait in the car," she said gently, touching her son's shoulder. When Tyler left, she turned and saw David watching from across the hall. Their eyes met, not with anger this time, but with years of unspoken understanding. In that single look lived everything they had lost and everything that still connected them. Regret, exhaustion, and a quiet kind of love that never fully dies, even after everything. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Tyler came back, walking between them toward the exit, his shadow stretching across the sunlit floor. For the first time, he looked at both of them and smiled. Months later, David would keep the judgment papers folded neatly in a box, tucked behind old photographs and worn-out bills. Not as proof that he had won, but as proof that he hadn't given up. He'd remember the sound of Judge Marion's voice, reminding him that peace costs less than pride. Angela, too, would remember that day, not for the judgment, but for the way her son looked at his father after so many years of silence. She would learn, slowly, that forgiveness wasn't weakness, it was the beginning of healing. And Tyler, somewhere between his new football games and part-time college classes, would find himself thinking about that courtroom, the lights, the stillness, and the woman who told him to make peace. Sometimes, when he called his father now, there was laughter instead of argument. They didn't talk about the past anymore, they just talked. And in that quiet, they found something far greater than a verdict: redemption. Lesson: family isn't about who wins an argument or who pays the bill. It's about who keeps showing up, even when it hurts. Pride divides, forgiveness rebuilds. And sometimes the real justice isn't in a courtroom, it's in the moment you finally decide to forgive.